Hi, I'm Peter J. Ray. Welcome. Today's topic is the 1974 Cleveland Indians baseball season. The Indians again played at Cleveland Municipal Stadium, and which actually was their home for about 60 years, from 1932 to 1994. So they were about two-thirds of the way through their time there, and it was an older building. My father and I think went to about 10 games that year. We would park in a small parking lot south of the stadium, walk down West 3rd Street, and past what they used to call Boudreaux Boulevard, which was the street running just south of the stadium. It's now Al Lerner Way, and now, of course, the stadium's gone. It's now First Energy Stadium, where the Browns play. The Indians don't play there anymore. In the same spot, they're south at Progressive Field in the downtown area. Anyway, my father and I, we would enter at Gate A. We would always get upper reserve between home and first, buy our tickets there. I think they're like $3.50 a piece. My dad used to say that that was a good place to sit to catch foul balls, since most of the batters were right-handed hitters. We'd walk in, he'd buy us a scorecard and a pencil, and he would keep score of the game, which is, I don't know if people do that anymore, where you mark down the, if they there's little squares, and if the guy bats, you put like a line. If he gets a single, you put a slanted line with a 1, and he used to do that. And we get some food. We get 2 foot-long hot dogs, 2 Cokes, and walk up the ramps to the upper deck, and then that scary catwalk to the seats, which is kind of, it's like a narrow walkway, and then you come out in this vast space, this huge stadium. Wow, it was really amazing. During the game, sometimes we'd buy from vendors. We'd buy peanuts in the shell. My dad would light a cigar often late in the latter innings. And or one time, the attendance was pretty low, not many people going to games. And one time, my dad lit a cigar, and folks behind us where the smoke came and went in their faces. So anyway, it was very happy memories. Actually, the 1974 Indians, that was a good year. They finished 77 and 85 in 4th place, but they were in contention for much of the year. They were a contender. Yeah, in fact, they were in first place in early July, so that's tremendous. Just imagine, you've played April, May, June, half the season. We were in first place, and then on August 1, we were only 2.5 games out of first. And then, of course, they didn't play well near the end. There was a major trade on April 27th with the Yankees. 7 guys, blockbuster trade. We traded Chris Chambliss, Dick Tidrow, and Cecil Upshaw to the Yanks for 4 pitchers: Fritz Peterson, Steve Klein, Tom Buskey, and Fred Bean. So, and then there was the anyway. Then there on June 4th there was the infamous beer night riot, and they used to have a promotion. The fans could buy beer for 10 cents, 10-cent beer night, and on this night they had a big crowd, and people got pretty crazy. A lot of people were drunk. I think there were kids young people smoking marijuana, and fans started going on the field, and I was listening to the game on the radio. I was 14, and Herb Scar and Joe Tay were getting pretty upset, and so finally, there's so many fans came on the field. They ended up. We forfeited the game. We lost that game, and we had a rally going. I think in the 9th inning. It was against Texas. So they make T-shirts for that now. Anyway, that was kind of a crazy night in Cleveland history. Ken Aspermani was the manager again. This was his 3rd year, and he did pretty well, because I think the 74 year was pretty good. Larry Doby was a coach, and Doby was played on the 1948 Cleveland Indians, and so that was nice. And he was the first African American player in the American League. Rocky Colavito had been fired. He was the coach the year before in 73. Of course, Colavito was a big star in the late 50s, and his trade we traded him in 1960, which was a disaster for Cleveland. Traded him to Detroit. Then he brought him. So he actually left Cleveland 3 times. They brought him back in '65. Made another bad trade because his best years were in Detroit. And he had a couple years in Cleveland, then he got traded again, and they brought him back as a coach, and then for whatever reason they let him go before the '74 season. In the field, we had John Lowenstein in left, and this was this first of 3 times he hit .242. Lowenstein stole 36 bases. That was pretty good because we really weren't a stealing team. The previous leader the year before was only 9. Interesting guy, John Lowenstein. George Hendrick was in center, hit .279, 19 home runs, 67 RBIs. Remember, he had trouble with the media, and Tony Kubek used to call him George Hendricks. And that wasn't his, it was Hendrick. There was no S. There was a player named Elrod Hendricks, and I don't know why Kubek continued to do that. I think it was just, his way of, since the media was kind of mad at Hendrick for being so difficult. Charlie Spikes was in right field, and Spikes had his best year. He was my favorite player. He hit .270 with 22 home runs and 80 RBIs. He had 10 stolen bases. Pretty good for a big guy. Charlie Spikes, God bless him. Buddy Bell was at third, hit .260, and he could hit, and he was a good fielder, a good guy. Buddy Bell, blonde hair. Frank Duffy was at short. His average fell off. He was down to .233, but he had 48 RBIs, which was pretty good for that era for a shortstop. Jack Brohammer was at second, and he had his best year. He had .270, and I was really happy for him. And the thing is, there was a rookie coming to take away his job who was a better fielder and a better hitter. So little did Jack Brohammer know that his really good year was not going to lead to any security. John Ellis was at first base, hit .285, good average, 10 home runs, 64 RBIs. Yeah, Ellis was a good player. He could hit. Had a really good year. Dave Duncan was our catcher. I forgot to talk about him in the '73 video. He hit 200, which is they call it the Mendoza line. If you go under 200, you're in trouble. But he was a catcher. Sometimes they allow this for. I noticed with the Indians now, this Yan Gomes. Sometimes he's way under 200, but he's a good catcher, so they keep him in the lineup. And Duncan had power. Dave Duncan actually went on to tremendous career as a pitching coach for the St. Louis Cardinals under Tony La Russa, and his son and Duncan's son Shelley played for Cleveland years later. Duncan as a catchers can be good pitching coaches. And the next year he got traded. All the women in Cleveland loved Dave Duncan. He was handsome. He had long hair. He got traded for Boog Powell, and I remember in school, one of my classmates was so mad, about the trade of Boog. Because Duncan was so good looking. She said, "Why do we need Boog Powell?" Oscar Gamble was our DH. He hit .290, really good, 19 home runs, 59 RBIs. And then the guys who on the bench who would play sporadically. Louis Alvarado was a kind of a short, stocky Mexican guy. And I remember two games. One game that there was a heavy wind blowing in from center field, and Alvarado crushed the ball right into that wind. And the center fielder caught it right against the center field wall. He hit it 400 feet. So anyway, that was pretty disappointing. Another game, he actually he hit a ball deep, and Alvarado could run, and he tried to get an inside the park home run, got thrown out of the plate. So that was too bad also. But you got to give the guy credit. That's one of the toughest plays in baseball, getting thrown out of the plate. Except you do get a triple, so it's good for your average and your stats, but it's ultimately it's an out. Cleveland picked up Rico Carty near the end of the year. He hit .363. Yeah, this was the beginning of he had some real good years in Cleveland. Rico Carty was charismatic, funny guy from the Dominican Republic. He had power, and he'd had a lot of injuries over the years. Played for Atlanta, had some severe injuries. Chris Chambliss, started the year with us. Was hitting .328 after 17 games when we traded him to the Yankees. And ultimately, that trade, it looked good at the time, and the trade helped Cleveland in the short term. In the long term, it hurt us. We got to see Chris Chambliss hit the walk-off home run that put the Yankees into the 76 World Series. He had some really good years for the Yankees, and won 2 World Series. And on that home run, the fans in Yankee Stadium stormed the field. By the time he got to second base, a fan had pulled second base out of the ground, and Chambliss touched it with his hand. And then he never touched third or home until later when they cleared the field. He just ran for his life to the dugout. And the old days, it was crazy, and they would let the fans storm on the field when a team won a World Series or something like this. And finally, I think the players got fed up with it, and the owner and the management put a stop to it because isn't safe. It's terrible. These guys are scared for their lives. So we lost Chris Chambliss. Ed Crosby got in some games as a utility infielder. Didn't hit 209. Didn't have much of a bat. Jack Heidemann, who had been, I believe, years previously had been the Indians' starting shortstop, got in a few games, 12 games, hit 091. So I think this was the end of the line for Heidemann in Cleveland. Angel Hermoso was the starting second baseman for Cleveland, I believe, at the beginning of the year. But early on, he hit 221. I think his career came to an end. Don Baylor went in hard on a slide at second base on a double play ball. Hermoso wasn't a big guy, and he hit him right in the. Baylor was a big guy and hit Hermoso right in the knee, and I believe that knee injury ended his career. Dwayne Kuiper played 10 games. This was the beginning of his career, and he took Jack Brohammer's job. Kuiper hit 500 in 10 games, and he was the second baseman of the future. Leron Lee got in 80 games, hit 230, had some power. Joe Liss was a funny guy, popular guy. He hit 202, but he had some power. 6 home runs and 57 games. Tom McCraw hit 304, and so that was good. And didn't play a lot. And then another big trade aside from the Yankee trade, we picked up Frank Robinson near the end of the year. And there were about 21 games to go, and this led to immediate trouble, because Gaylord Perry was the star on the team. Gaylord Perry was by far the star and the dominant player and the best player. And then Frank Robinson came. He was at the end of his career. He had been a tremendous slugger for the Cincinnati Reds and Baltimore Orioles, and he and Perry had conflict in the National League when Perry pitched. Again, when Perry was playing for the Giants and Robinson for the Reds, so they'd had face-offs where Perry would pitch inside and he wasn't afraid to hit a guy, and they were both fighters, and so Robinson was a fighter. So immediately there was this conflict on the team because of that, which was too bad. Actually, when they picked up Robinson, we were only 5 games out of first, and then they went into a tailspin. They won 6-15 the rest of the year because there was just sort of a poisonous atmosphere on the team because of this immediate conflict between Frank Robinson and Gaylord Perry. They were two stars, and they butted heads, and too bad they couldn't work together, but they couldn't. And part of it was racial. I think Perry was from North Carolina, and Frank Robinson was a guy, he wasn't going to take crap from anybody. He was a really very outspoken fellow. Tommy Smith batted .097. He was one of these guys who was perpetually trying to make the team and hung around for a while. Rusty Torres was down to .187 in 108 games. I think that was the end of the line for Torres. Now among the pitchers, Gaylord Perry went 21-13. He was our star player, and he won 15 games in a row. I remember the streak ended in Oakland when Claudel Washington knocked in a run and beat Cleveland, and that ended his winning streak. He actually completed 28 games, pitched a lot of innings, had a real good ERA of 2.51, pitched 4 shutouts. Gaylord Perry had a wonderful year. His brother Jim was on the team, Jim Perry. And Jim Perry actually had played for Cleveland in the early 60s. In 74, he was 17-12. So the Perry brothers, they were 1-2 in the Indians' order. And Jim Perry was a good guy. I remember at a game, I went down. I think we sat in the lower deck. We usually sat in the upper deck. I went over. Jim Perry was signing autographs, and I went over to see him. And I didn't want an autograph. I just wanted to stand. I just stood there, for maybe 5 minutes while he was signing autographs, looking at him. That gave me satisfaction. We got Fritz Peterson in the Yankee deal. He came over. He'd had some good years with the Yankees. He gave us a couple good years in Cleveland. Probably the best player in the, well, one of the best players in the deal we got. He was 9-14, but I think the next year he did better. So he was our third starter. Dick Bosman went 7-5, and he pitched a no-hitter on July 19th at the stadium. I was on a bus going from Cleveland to New Mexico, Philmont Scout Ranch, and listening to the game on the radio, and I heard the first 3 innings. I knew Bosman had a no-hitter after 3 innings, and I took. At the end of the trip, I found out he threw that no-hitter. So that was a real thrill for the folks in Cleveland. Steve Arlen went 2-5. He got the chance to start. I think we got him for Brent Strom. He had a 6.6 ERA. That's really bad. Fred Bean was a guy we got in the Yankee deal, and he'd had a tremendous year out of the bullpen the year before. I think he was like 6-0 with a 1.60 ERA. Bean didn't do much for Cleveland. I think he had a sore arm, and the Yankees knew that. Tom Buskey went 2-6, but he led the team with 17 saves. My father used to get really mad at Buskey. He must have blown a couple games when my dad was listening to a game. Buskey actually is another guy. We traded him. He had his best years later with Toronto. Too bad. Tom Buskey was a big guy. But anyway, he was our closer that year. So he actually helped a lot in that trade. Tom Hilgendorf was pretty good in the bullpen as well. Steve Klein was the other starter we got from the Yankees, and he didn't do very well. He was a young guy. They thought, he's going to have a great future, but he went 3-8 with a 5.07 ERA. So Steve Klein didn't. I think he had a few good starts, but overall he didn't do very well. Dick Tidrow was 1-3 before he got traded to the Yanks. He had a 7.11 ERA, so that was the end of the road for Tidrow in Cleveland. He had some good years with the Yankees. And then we had Ken Sanders. Remember the year before, he'd done very, very well at the end of the year, but he probably had a sore arm. He was 0-1 in 9 games with a 9.82 ERA, which is really, really bad. And then Cecil Upshaw was 0-1 in 7 games. He was traded to the Yankees. So and Milt Wilcox, Wilcox must have had a sore arm as well. He was only 2-2 with a 4.67 ERA. So anyway, it was an amazing year. The 74 Tribe. Yeah, a lot going on. The big trade with the Yankees, the beer night riot, Dick Bosman's no-hitter. A lot of attendance really went up. We got up over 1 million. We had 1.1 million. First time in over 15 years. So there was excitement with the Tribe in 74. They gave us a lot of good memories, even though they faded late in the year. So anyway, that concludes our talk. Thank you so much for watching. Tribe rules. Cleveland City of Champions. Good luck to the 2018 Cleveland Indians, and I'll see you next time.